It would probably be fair to say that not many know who Nabonidus were or are familiar with his name. Nabonidus is the last king of the new Babylonian Empire that had risen after the fall of the new Assyrian Empire in 612 BCE. In fact, Nabonidus became the last king of all the Sumerian and Mesopotamian cultures that had stood in the area for several thousand years. Nabonidus is quite an interesting character. He was active in campaigning, stretching the borders of his empire. He has been called the first archaeologist, and he went into exile in his own land. It also seems that he wanted to rearrange the Babylonian pantheon. In late July 2021, the Saudi Commission for National Heritage announced that they had found a stone with engravings picturing the last Babylonian king. Apart from the religious symbols shown on the stone, seen in the only photograph revealed to the public, there were also 26 lines of cuneiform text that has still to be revealed. But the interesting question is, of course, why is there a stone picturing the last king of Babylonia far away in Saudi Arabia? I am your host Morten Eriksson. Welcome to Ancient History. Let me put him in context first. Nabonidus, or Nabu-Naid, ruled as king in the new Babylonian Empire between 556 and 539 BCE, when he was dethroned by Cyrus and the Persians invaded his country. At this time, the Neo-Babylonian Empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean and Red Seas. It seems Nabonidus came to power somewhat unexpectedly when his son Belshazzar staged a coup and killed the newly crowned king Labashi-Marduk. He had gained the throne somewhere in spring 556 and was slain somewhere before the end of June in the same year. Nabonidus' lineage seemed not to have been part of the Chaldean dynasty that had ruled the empire, but it appears as if he was connected to the court in some way. It is also possible that he was married into the royal family. His mother was of Assyrian descent, and he had spent his childhood in Haran in northern Mesopotamia. Haran was among other things a religious center for the worship of the moon god Sin, a fact that would come to have consequences. Nabonidus seemed to have been a dynamic ruler with an unorthodox religious program. In 553, Nabonidus, now king, left Babylon and went west to campaign in the anti-Lebanon mountains, today bordering between Lebanon and Syria. After that, he went south and campaigned in Arabia. For some reason, he then took up residence in the oasis city Taima, located in western Arabia, fortifying the city. He came to stay there for almost a decade, until 543, while his son Belshazzar acted as the de facto ruler back in Babylon. We do not know why he stayed so long in Taima, but it has been speculated that he was in conflict with the religious oligarchs in Babylon, due to his shown favoritism towards the moon god Sin, whom he tried to exalt and elevate over Marduk, the head of the Babylonian pantheon. Nabonidus lets us know in inscriptions from this time about the impiety of the Babylonians. On the other hand, he seems to have toned down his preference for Sin during his exile in Taima. Or perhaps it was a conflict with a faction led by his son Belshazzar. It is today unclear if the division of power between Nabonidus and Belshazzar was a conflict or a co-rulership. In any case, Nabonidus returned to Babylon in 543, seemingly without any conflict with his son or the clergy in the city. And at this time, he also restored his religious ambitions. Upon his arrival in Mesopotamia, he also rebuilt a Kul, the temple of Sin in Haran, a restoration that he had promised when he took up the crown. From this time on, Marduk is almost completely ignored. His reign lasted for about 4 more years, until the Persian king Cyrus invaded Babylonia in 539. A battle was fought at Opis, later to be made known by Alexander, where the Babylonians lost. The Persians could enter Babylon without resistance. Belshazzar was killed, but Nabonidus might have been spared by Cyrus. There is no clear information of his last days. Several sources, in fact, state that he was allowed to take up residence in Campania and that he might still have been alive as late as during the reign of Darius, 522 to 486. But what about the stone then? The find is a basalt stone located in the Ha'il region in northern Saudi Arabia, in antiquity known as Fadak. The fact that it stands there is probably linked to the Babylonian tradition of raising border stones. Several similar finds of freestanding stones have been discovered in the past. On its surface, we can see Nabonidus with his staff looking at 4 symbols in the sky, obviously having religious meaning. In fact, what we see is that at least 3 of the symbols are common divine symbols of the Babylonian pantheon. Nabonidus himself is portraited in an attire that can partly be derived from Assyrian tradition. To us, he looks almost like a magician in his robe and pointy hat, a friendly mage perhaps. Closest to Nabonidus we have Sin, the moon god. He had in the beginning of time been the full moon, Su'en. Over time, though, he had transformed into the moon in a wider sense, symbolized by the crescent moon Sin. Sin was the father of the gods and the god of wisdom. He came to be worshipped in Haran up to the rise of Islam. In fact, the crescent moon, still seen in many national flags in the region, can be traced back to Sin. Second, we see the iconic winged or feathered sun disk. The sun, also represented as Shamash or Utu, was the god of justice, morality and truth. Third, we see a 7-pointed star. It represents Ishtar, the goddess of sex, love and war, among other things. It is also a representation of the planet Venus. Strictly speaking, though, Ishtar is missing 1 ray. She should have 8. However, there are more engravings of Nabonidus with just the 7 points. It might be a mistake of the artist or an intentional deviation. In any case, stone carvings are hard to correct once you have started. In this trinity of gods and celestial bodies, Sin was the father of the sun god Shamash, and according to some myths, also to Ishtar. As we know, Sin was favored by Nabonidus, and the Babylonian Marduk was after all just the child of the sun, a grandson to Sin. On the other hand, Marduk did have his own pet dragon. Farthest to the left, we can see a serpent-like shape. Its meaning is not known at the moment, and perhaps the cuneiform text will shed light on it. There are, however, several snake-like symbols in Babylonian iconography. From a strict astronomical, or rather astrological, point of view, the Milky Way also used to be represented as a snake. As a companion to the other 3, this might thus be our galaxy, but we do not know. There is also the 26-line cuneiform text that cannot be seen, the longest of such texts ever found in Saudi Arabia. Perhaps it sits on an opposing side. It has not yet been revealed to the public and is currently being translated by experts. There is much to be said about Nabonidus, and I think that will be reason for us to return to him in later episodes. Until then, we can only hope for a hasty translation of those 26 lines of cuneiform text. Meanwhile, we can let our minds wander about that last Babylonian king and his toppy hat among the magic of planets. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. And if you enjoy my videos about the ancient world and would like to support me to make even better ones in the future, please consider joining me at Patreon. I've put the link to my Patreon site in the description to the video.